So I just finished Wednesday's Child Stories by Yiyun Li. So this is a collection of short stories by Yiyun Li. I've already read Book of the Goose, and I just read her memoir, Things in Nature Merely Grow. And Things in Nature Merely Grow was published after this, but because I had read it before, I noticed a lot of stuff in this that is autobiographical, stuff that actually happened in her life. And it was kind of shocking to me that if I had just read this as fiction, I would have saw a lot of themes, a lot of similarities, themes of death and loss and grief and reflection on the past and suicide especially. But having read her memoir, knowing what she went through and what has happened in her life, and even little anecdotes and stuff she tells in there, a lot of this is very autobiographical. So if you don't know Yiyun Li, so she was born in China. She moved to the US for university. She then married and had 2 kids. She dealt with suicide herself a bit when she was younger, and then her oldest child committed suicide at age 16, and then her youngest suicide at 19. And a lot of these stories, and I think all of these were written before the death of her second son. So a lot of this, I think, is just a reflection on or related to the death of her first son. So there are 11 short stories in this collection, and I want to go through sort of each one and just sort of give a quick overview of what it's about and what I thought of it. So the first one is called Wednesday's Child, which is what the collection's named after. And it's about this woman whose daughter has committed suicide, and so she's gone on, I don't want to say a holiday, but she's traveled to Europe, and she's heading to the battlefield at Ypres. Why she's heading there is not really discussed, but she's reflecting a lot about sort of death in the past at this time, and her husband's dealing with it in his own way back home, but she's traveling off to the Netherlands. And while on the train, she sits across from this woman who's very pregnant, and it's the height of COVID, by the way. A lot of these short stories are sort of set in very specific contexts like COVID and a lot of American politics. But anyways, the woman who's pregnant, her water breaks, and the main character sort of helps her out a bit, and then the emergency services are called, and the woman is taken to the hospital. And it's a Wednesday when this happens, and the character reflects that her daughter, who had killed herself, was born on a Wednesday, and she thinks that maybe her intervention or something caused her to something might have affected this new baby and caused it to be born early on this Wednesday. And there's like an old poem or song or something, fairy tale, nursery rhyme, that Wednesday's child is full of woe, and so maybe this child will be full of woe like her daughter because it's born on a Wednesday. So very autobiographical, of course. There's even a part in it when the trains are delayed because someone had stepped in front of the train to kill themselves, which is the way that I believe both of her children passed away. The next one's a bit different, but very interesting. So it's called A Sheltered Woman. It's about this old woman who's she's a nanny for newborns. She only nannies them for 1 month to sort of help the mothers out during the first month of motherhood, and she always moves on after that. She never commits to being a nanny for longer than that. She also sort of never commits to being in a relationship or having children of her own. She's a very sheltered woman. She sort of creates these invisible barriers around herself psychologically to maybe blunt the pain of loss, and sort of because she never loved or she never held on, then she's never going to experience the loss and the pain from that. And anyways, the course of the story, she's dealing with this mother who, because of postpartum depression, or the mother claims that, and the main character in the novel kind of scoffs at that, doesn't want anything to do with her child and gives up on her child. And the father's currently on like a business trip or something, and is blamed. But this baby's sort of on their own, but for this nanny. And there's this old repairman who comes around, and it sort of seems like there's going to be some sort of a new family formed with the nanny and the repairman looking after this baby that's been abandoned by its family. And she sort of is starting to feel like, I should take on this role. I should help this baby out. I should finally, stop running to the next family and the next family. But in the end, she just continues. She does that. She leaves the family, and once her contract's up, goes on to the next. And it's sort of this sheltering, these barriers she puts up kind of prevent her from living fully, and misses out on a lot of life because of that. And I felt I could really relate to that. sort of being stuck in ruts that you've sort of created, and those ruts then become walls that you build to sort of protect yourself, but at the same time you're hurting yourself. You're cutting yourself off and isolating yourself on purpose. And sure, maybe you're protecting yourself in some way, but you're also protecting yourself from life, and it's not healthy. The next one, Hello, Goodbye. It's like a COVID story. It takes place in COVID. It starts out with these two women in like Silicon Valley in the 2000s. They're in their 20s. They've got plans to make their fortunes and found these companies and whatnot. Then it skips ahead to 2020, and one of them has been married to this older man who's like a horrible person, treats her awfully, and she's always been saying she's going to divorce him, but this time she's really going to. And so she moves in with her friend who's now married with two daughters, and sort of reflect on living in isolation during the pandemic and the past, and how what they wanted to happen isn't really happening, and how life isn't what they thought it would be, and stuff like that. It was all right. The next one, number 4, is called Small Flame. It's about this woman she's in China on sort of vacation. She's brought her friend and his husband with her to sort of show them around, act as tour guide. They're heading back to the US, but she's going to stick around for a bit. She's reflecting on her past, and a lot of these are like reflections on past lives. And she thinks about this teacher she had and sort of wonders what the teacher's been up to, and sort of calls an old school friend and managed to find out about this teacher who's now sort of advocating for LGBT rights in China. There's also a bit where this woman had been adopted by a family, and she found out later that there had been another girl that was adopted before her, but this other girl was not sort of smart enough, or she had some sort of a disability or special needs, and so she was unadopted and abandoned. And then this main character was then sort of put in her place, reflecting on the role that she has to play as this daughter, and she sort of has left that family and moved to the US. But yeah, kind of a weird one. Is it about LGBT rights or just a reflection on the past? I don't know. The next one's On the Street Where You Live. I don't know what to say about it other than it's sort of this mother dealing with a son who's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, and yeah, her struggles with that. There's kind of a neat metaphor about being at an art gallery at the start. She's looking at this painting, and there's sort of someone questions her, or she references wanting to change it, or to throw paint on it, to either destroy it or change it or fix it or something, as maybe sort of a metaphor for dealing with a child with autism. Anyways, that's that one. Next, we have one called Such Common Life. This one was kind of interesting. It was a longer one. It was about this older woman who's a caretaker for an even older woman who's this retired professor of bugs. What's that? An entomologist. And they sort of both have their secrets, and they keep them close to their chest, but the reader gets to hear some of these. And they both sort of have experiences as children, being the sort of the love interest, the lust interest of teachers, and had been abused by teachers. One of them had these two teachers who were married, this married couple, and both of them used her. But then the other secret, that the younger of the two has to sort of leave for a bit, because when she was young, her sort of childhood friend fell in love with her teacher, and because her childhood friend had like political connections through her family, managed to get this teacher to actually marry her. And she had a child with this teacher at age 13. And then she later divorced him when I think she was like 40s or 50s. And then in order to meet someone else, she managed to get this the main sort of character to forge her birth certificate of her daughter, because her daughter was 28, but she wanted it to make it look like her daughter was actually 18. So if her daughter's 10 years younger, then that means she actually gave birth to her daughter when she was 23, not when she was 13. And this now has ramifications in the future, because this woman is now having a baby at age 51, even though her birth certificate says she's only 41. So the doctors think, oh, 41, that's very old to have a child, when she's actually 51 having a child, which is extremely old. So kind of about how sharing secrets kind of takes some of their power away, and some of the sort of superstition about them. It was an interesting one, kind of long, but again, there's a lot of these. Another one of the themes is sort of, I don't know, pedophilia, specifically 12 and 13, 14-year-old girls being used and abused by older people. Speaking of which, the 7th one is called The Flawless Silence, which dealt with this young adult woman who this older Chinese man, I mean, it's in China, this older man came and wanted to sort of inspect her to find out if she could marry his son. And then he wants to give her English lessons and sort of train her to be a good wife for his son. But she's really put off by him and he takes offense to that. And then it's sort of like, it's the vibes that he wants to abuse her for himself. Anyways, she flees to the U.S. and marries someone else, but this old man continues to contact her for forever and ever and she doesn't say anything. She's silent the whole time. But at the end of the story, she finally responds to the man, like telling him off and telling him to leave her alone. There's also a lot of U.S. politics. So there's this woman's husband and her friend's husband are both big Trump supporters, and her children and her friend's children are both trying to navigate going to a school in California with a parent who is a firm Trump supporter, and how the mothers are very much against Trump, but the fathers want their daughters and their children to be raised to be proud supporters of Trump and think he's doing a great job. Now, this was written the first time around, so there's comparisons with like Clinton and Trump. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I'm not sure how, in general, how opinions have shifted on Donald Trump since 2016. I mean, in this country, certainly to the negative, but yeah, it was weird sort of remembering that 10 years ago, this was when this phenomenon first started. Anyway, so that was A Flawless Silence. Next, we have Let Mothers Doubt, which was about this Mongolian woman who had a much younger brother that she was kind of the mother to and kind of raised in her own way. And this brother died from an overdose. And so she sort of, to cope with that, started sleeping with her boss, or this man higher up in the company. And it comes out that this man's like a predator and he preys on young women. But she didn't really, not saying that he's not a predator, but in her case, it was very consensual. And she was okay with this man cheating on his wife with her. She was into it. So it wasn't really an issue for her, just to kind of complicate things. But yeah, an interesting one. Next, we have Alone, which I really like this one. So it's this woman who is driving up the northwest coast of the U.S., has sort of just got a divorce, has gotten rid of all of her belongings, and it seems like maybe she's heading to make a new start. But you find out through the course of the story that something's gone wrong in her past. There was some sort of an accident where a whole bunch of teenage girls died, but she survived. So does she have survivor's guilt? What's going on? And she finally tells the truth to there's this old man that sort of makes a connection with her and is constantly like asking her to hang out and get coffee together and whatnot. And she finally admits to him that it was a group suicide. They had all planned to commit suicide. Why did they do this? We can't give a reason why, but this group of 5 or so 12 to 13-year-old girls all agreed to commit suicide. So they all get in a boat, row into the lake, and get drunk, and then jump in the water. And they all do, but for whatever reason, the main character grabs onto an oar and manages to survive. And so this sort of journey on the Pacific coast is sort of her wrapping up this story. She's going to now commit suicide and join those girls that she had left 20 years ago, or however long it was. And it kind of feels like meeting this old man's gonna like give her a reason to live or whatever. But no, in the end, it doesn't explicitly state it, but it feels like she's still on the path and she's still going to end her life. Yeah, one of my favorite ones of this collection. So the last two are, again, very autobiographical, talking about mothers dealing with the death of a child. Number 10 is When We Were Happy, We Had Other Names, which, yeah, a mother's reflecting on the death of her child by making a list of all of the people in her life that she's known that have died, and trying to like guess dates and names and reasons, and coming up short on a lot of them. But yeah, just a big reflection on death. And 11, the last one, All Will Be Well, is a very sort of, it almost feels like it could be a true story. Like, I'm not sure if it's fake or not, because the main character is this Chinese American woman who had been born in China, but for the sake of the story pretends that she's not. She references a few times losing a child, but it's not the main point of the story at all. The main story follows her going to this Vietnamese hairdresser, or I guess it's a Chinese hairdresser, but this hairdresser had grown up in Vietnam, and through the course of months tells the story to this main character that she had met this boy when she was in Vietnam, a Vietnamese boy, and they were so much in love, and he was like crazy in love with her. But there was a war between China and Vietnam, which not many people know about. And for that reason and others, she and her family fled Vietnam, eventually coming to the US. And it broke that boy's heart, and he still loved her. And she tells that this boy, now a man, now married, although still incredibly in love with this girl that had left him. Contacted her, and they talk on the phone, and he's just in tears, and his whole family, his daughters and his wife, say they have this picture of this woman, this hairdresser, and how she's still like a part of the family because the husband and father loves her so much. And a really sort of weird love story, but kind of a wholesome one, that this love stayed true all this time, even though it's not the woman he's married to. Anyways, that is Wednesday's Child stories, or that is Wednesday's Child, a collection of stories. Anyways, Yiyun Li, one of my favorite authors. She's a brilliant author, a brilliant writer. Yeah, lots of reflections on death, lots of suicide. I would like to read more of her. The Book of Goose, I think, is quite a bit different, but I'd like to read more stuff like that. Not that I want to get away from all the death and grief and loss and whatnot. I mean, I think that's important too, but yeah, I definitely want to read more of her. Again, that was Wednesday's Child by Yiyun Li.